This week's episode of Trek Geeks is brought to you by Fansets, the place for amazing pin collectibles. They have close to 200 officially licensed Star Trek pins to choose from, with new pins coming out every month. See all the pins and collectibles they have to offer at fansets.com, and stay tuned for this week's special Trek Geeks discount code. Fansets. We are Star Trek.
Hi, this is Andy Robinson, Elam Garrick on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and you are listening to the biggest little podcast this side of the Gamma Quadrant. It's the Trek Geeks Podcast with Dan Davidson and Bill Smith. Failure to tune in would not sit well with the Obsidian Order.
From Podfleet Command and the special Retrospective office located on the 47th floor. It's the biggest little show this side of the Alpha Quadrant and the flagship of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network. Greetings, one and all, and welcome to the Trek Geeks Podcast. I'm your co-host, Bill Smith. We are very excited to be here this week. We're going to address a topic that we've had to reschedule a couple of times, but we're still very excited to talk about. It's one that we're kind of long overdue in talking about as we think about it, and I'm sure you'll understand why in a moment after I introduce my co-host.
There we go.
I have to spend 6 hours plus in a car with him coming up this coming weekend to go to Ticonderoga round trip, and I'm wondering if there's anything I can take to just sort of be out for the whole time, but wake up as soon as I get there. So if you have any recommendations, please let me know on Twitter. But for now, he's my best friend and the guy I love to do Trek things with. Welcome, Dan Davidson.
99 bottles of beer on the wall. We're going to do that the whole trip. We're going to start with 1,701 bottles of beer on the wall, and we're going to sing it the whole way. Isn't that awesome?
So, yeah, if you have recommendations. Hey, buddy. It's good to have you.
It's good to be here, man. I'm looking very forward to our trip this coming weekend to Ticonderoga. It's going to be a lot of fun. But before that, we've got, like you said, we've got a great discussion here that we've had to put off a little bit. And we're finally going to talk about the matriarch of Star Trek, Majel Barrett Roddenberry. It's something that we've wanted to do for a long time with the Fansets Women of Star Trek collection being released recently, and it's time to do it. So here we are. We're going to do it. You made the executive decision, and I do what you say because you're the boss, pal.
That's really kind of a first for you. How are you feeling about that?
I'm feeling pretty good. I don't have to make any decisions, and I'm not responsible for anything that goes wrong.
If people only knew what really happened around here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, it's interesting the role that Majel played, not just in Star Trek, but behind the scenes and her relationship with Gene. And we're going to talk about some of that today. I remember seeing her at her last convention, and I was still just in awe of her because I was amazed that she was out there, you know, doing those long days and meeting fans and smiling for every one of them and taking photos. And she really was, I think of her as an ambassador, much like Lwaxana was. She really was an ambassador of Star Trek. And I will remember that as long as I live.
Yeah, I have two regrets when it comes to conventions, because there was a stretch of time where I didn't do any. And that's, I never got to see Leonard Nimoy, and I never got to see Majel. That's too bad. I'm glad that you were able to, because I'm sure it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it totally was. You know what else is awesome? As you can tell the folks at home playing the home game how they can get in touch with us.
It is it's just so easy to get in touch with us, Bill. Just head right on over to trekgeeks.com/contact, and you will find a variety of ways to get in touch with either Bill or myself. You can leave us a voicemail, you can Skype chat us, you can fill out the contact form and type us out a personalized message, or just make it a lot easier. Click on that big blue button on the right side of the website and leave us a message with your very own mellifluous voice using SpeakPipe. And hey, don't forget, the place to be on Facebook these days is the official Trek Geeks Facebook group, Camp Kittimer. Bring your Trek talk, your Trek pics, and your Trek love over to the site and join over 1,400 other friends talk all things Trek. It is the place on social media where the Trek talk is positive, with no bashing or gatekeeping allowed. Plus, if there are new announcements about the Trek Geeks Podcast Network, you're going to hear about it first in Camp Kittimer before anyone else in the quadrant. To join the group, just head on over to facebook.com/groups/Camp Kittimer and be ready to take part in a truly wonderful social experience. And as always, we want to thank our wonderful admins, Haley, Jackie, and Dan, for the amazing job they do running the camp. But please, it is very important to remember that any comments or messages that you leave us in any of these places may be used in a future episode. Bill, I got it all through without making a single mistake, and I'm pretty happy. Back to you.
Wow, somebody write this down. Whoever had episode number 188... for how long it would take Dan to get through that mistake free, you just won yourself a whole bunch of nothing.
Wow. I'm proud of myself. Thank you.
And by that, I mean you won Dan Davidson.
Wow.
Dan, it's time for the news from TrekNews.net. Spanning the Alpha Quadrants. For all the news on all the Star Trek show. It's TrekNews.net. I feel like we just drifted into the middle of a Herbie Hancock song.
Oh, I can't sing it.
No, you can't.
No, I want to, though, very much.
Online at TrekNews.net, which, by the way, is also where you can find TrekNews.net. Dan, first up, the big news this week is that a reunification of sorts has taken place, and it may have a direct impact on Star Trek.
It may. Yeah, it's possible. Reunification. I love it. This copy is great. Good stuff, man. After years of rumors, CBS and Paramount Pictures, parent company Viacom, are merging, and the end result will form one of the largest entertainment companies on the planet, valued at over $30 billion. This means that for the first time since 2005, the Star Trek franchise, both movie and TV rights, will be housed under the same roof. Now, while the effects of this merger on Trek are not really known yet, it does mean that the franchise will no longer have to tiptoe around when it comes to movies versus TV series. And it'll be interesting to see how things develop under the course of the next few years as we continue to see new shows announced and the continued swirling rumors about that possible Quentin Tarantino directed Star Trek movie. And I gotta say, Bill, from a personal perspective, this really isn't a big deal for me. To be honest, it's a business. These things happen. And for me, the movies have been on hold for a while now. So as they say, business as usual, as far as I can see. Time will tell, though, I guess.
No, I agree with you. I mean, here's the thing. Even before the reunification of the two companies, CBS and Paramount still had the same parent company in National Amusements, the company owned by the Redstone family. Now, with this merger, Sherry Redstone takes over direct control of either Viacom CBS or CBS Viacom, whatever it's going to be called. And for now, it's status quo. All these people thinking it's going to launch an MCU type perspective for Star Trek. I just enough, people.
You know what's great? They won't have to worry about that silly 25% rule.
Oh, let's not even talk about that, because then people are going to think it's a thing.
No, it's not. I'm joking, people. Joking. Okay.
Yeah, CBS has always owned Star Trek, and people say, well, Paramount owns the movies. Paramount owns the rights to make movies. CBS still puts out product with movie characters, and they license product with movie characters, and I look no farther than our dear friends at Fansets, who have Kelvin Timeline pins.
Yes. Yep.
That were authorized and licensed by CBS. So this it's great. I think in the long term, it's going to be good for Star Trek because maybe it means we get more movies, possibly.
Yep.
But like you said, the fourth one's been on hold for a while and in a couple of different forms. So right now, this news is very meh.
Oh, I was hoping you'd throw one of those in there for the story. Thank you.
It's important in the scope of business, but in the scope of Star Trek right now, it's just as it was yesterday.
Yep, absolutely. I agree. Absolutely. Yep.
Well, Dan, also speaking of a possible Tarantino film, one Kelvin Timeline actor thinks it would be pretty cool, and I'm stunned by this revelation.
Yeah, well, damn it, Bill, I'm a podcaster, not a movie critic. That was horrible. That was very bad.
That was the worst.
That was terrible. I was watching my meter. I didn't want to go over it. So. Yes. Carl Urban, who of course plays Dr. McCoy in the Kelvin Timeline movies, recently stated he thought the idea of a Quentin Trek would be great. The actor said during an interview with HuffPost that, quote, I think Quentin Tarantino doing that film would be phenomenal. He is definitely one of the most exciting filmmakers that's currently working, and if he has an interest in making a Star Trek film, I think the studio would be insane not to let him do that, end quote. He also added that, quote, obviously, I'd very much relish the opportunity to be part of it if it came to be, end quote, if Tarantino were chosen to direct what would most likely be an R-rated adventure for the crew of the Enterprise, Bill. And we've talked about it several times on the show. It's still rumor. There's nothing that's been concrete, but yet we always still come back to talking about it.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, people treat this as news that actors want to work with Quentin Tarantino. I hate to shoot down like two things in a row, but let's be honest. There's not a single member of the Kelvin Timeline cast that's going to say, Quentin Tarantino, screw that. I don't want to do that movie.
Yeah, exactly. I don't need a check.
Yeah, right. It's just water is wet. Carl Urban has done an incredible amount of work that's fantastic. I'm watching The Boys on Amazon right now, which he is fantastic in. Not a shock that a great actor like Carl would want to work with somebody who has become a legendary director in Hollywood. Say what you will about his movies. I'm not a fan of all of them. I'm a fan of some of the ones that people might be surprised at, quite honestly. But it's no surprise that an A-list actor like Carl Urban wants to work with a top-tier director like Quentin Tarantino.
Shocker.
Not a shock.
Yeah. No, I agree. We'll see what happens. And speaking of that, I got to start watching The Boys because I've heard very good things about it. So
it's very different. It's not quite as dark as Watchmen, but it's dark. It's a bunch of superheroes under corporate control.
Oh, interesting.
And I know you don't have a problem with gore. There is some gore.
Yeah.
But some very interesting, very layered, very complex characters.
Oh, all right. And you're able to understand it? Anyway.
Well, yeah, because I'm not Dan Davidson.
Ouch. Wow.
And Dan, moving on, we want to remind everyone that as this episode drops, you and I are going to be taking a trek to upstate New York. And man, we couldn't be any more excited about this.
As the days get closer, we get more and more excited. Yes, this coming weekend, as we record, August 23rd through 25th, the 5th annual Trek-Conderoga event will be taking place at the Star Trek Original Series Set Tour in Ticonderoga, New York. Now, special guests will include Ethan Peck, Terry Farrell, Robin Curtis, J.G. Hertzler, and David Frankham. There will be set tours hosted by tour owner James Cawley, as well as Ethan, Terry, and JG as well. And JG will be General Martok during the tours, which is pretty cool. I think that's on Saturday. There's going to be all kinds of awesome stuff like panels, one of which both you and I, Bill, will be hosting, which we're very excited about. There'll be cosplay, trivia, autographs, photos. Terry will be donning a TOS uniform as Dax, just like she did in Trials and Tribulations. It's going to be a really fun weekend, and tickets are still available at StarTrekTour.com.
You know, it's pretty amazing. Our panel, Star Trek Saved My Life, happens Saturday at 2 p.m. local time. We've been asked if we're going to record it. We're going to try to. The venue is a high school, and it doesn't really necessarily lend to native recording. So it's not like there's an audiovisual system throughout the venue like there would be at a convention hall.
Right.
We're essentially in a high school, I'm going to guess classroom or smaller library type room. And we have no idea what the audio setup is going to be. So we're going to bring a microphone to set between us, kind of like we did for Granite State Comic Con, and see what happens. But other than that, it's hard saying not knowing. But I'm looking forward to hosting that panel with you Saturday at 2 p.m. It should be a very open and welcoming discussion, and I look forward to meeting the attendees afterward.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We've been, it's just as exciting as STLV in some ways for me. I mean, it's a new one for us. The folks that we've been talking to up there at StarTrekTour.com have been most welcoming. It's really going to be great. And I hear a rumor that Galt's going to be there too. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. The providers are looking for more members of the herd, and
looking forward to it.
I know they're not going to pick me because I'm not worthy.
Oh, we shall see. You are very worthy.
No. No. And Dan, finally, another week and another sad report to share regarding a Trek alum who unfortunately has passed away.
Yeah, man, it seems that we're doing this way too often. I said that last time. But sadly, TNG and DS9 guest actress Barbara Scarf, known during her time on TNG by her professional name Barbara March, passed away on Saturday, August 10th after battling cancer. Trek fans will always remember her for the role as Klingon Lursa from the House of Duras. She appeared in TNG's Redemption Part 1 and 2, as well as Firstborn, and then was seen on DS9 in Season 1's past prologue. And then we also finally saw her on the big screen in Generations, where she and her sister B'Etor met their fate. In addition to Trek, she appeared on shows such as LA Law and Night Heat, and was also a renowned theater actress, having played roles such as Lady Macbeth and the Duchess of Malfi. In recent years, she was seen at Trek conventions everywhere, and on many occasions, she actually took the stage in her full Lursa makeup and wardrobe. Trek Geeks offers our sincerest condolences to Barbara's family, friends, and fans.
Dan, as always, we want to thank our friends at Fansets for sponsoring this week's show. You know, STLV is now in the rear view mirror, and the release of 20. Yeah, you heard that right. That's 20 new pins was a huge success for them. And as always, we're looking forward to what's going to be coming next from Fansets, aren't we?
Oh, we absolutely are. You know, I haven't even had the opportunity to put my new Women of Trek collection on the wall yet, Bill. And yet here we are giving our listeners an exclusive on the release of what is going to be the next Women of Trek pin. Very excited about this. You know, during STLV, people who purchased at the Fansets booth were asked who they would like to see next in this collection. And we are proud to announce here on Trek Geeks that the next pin will be none other than Jadzia Dax. Very, very cool.
Woo!
Yes, we think it's fantastic news, and it's actually perfect timing as we're going to be in Ticonderoga this coming weekend along with Terry herself at Trekconderoga. So win-win, buddy.
A win-win indeed. This was the result of a fan vote at STLV while people were actually making purchases at their table. So it was a very informal vote, and Jadzia was the winner, head and shoulders above everybody else. And so they're listening to what the fans want, and Jadzia is going to be the next pin. That's really exciting. Also, just to let everyone know, everybody at Fansets, they're kind of wiped after STLV. So they're recharging their warp coils due to the large amount of releases for Star Trek Las Vegas. So there aren't going to be any new pins for the month of September. As Sarek would say, worry not. October is going to bring some new pins, and we're going to be sure to tell you what they are ahead of time. You can bet on that. In the meantime, as always, as a special bonus to all our Trek Geeks listeners, if you would like to receive 15% off your entire order at fansets.com this week, simply enter the word Majel at checkout. That's MAJEL in all capital letters. This bonus code is going to be available until Tuesday, August 27th, 2019 at midnight Eastern Daylight Time.
Fansets. We are Star Trek, and we thank our friends at Fansets for sponsoring this week's episode.
Well, Dan, speaking of Majel, we gathered today to discuss that very individual as part of our ongoing Women of Trek retrospective. It's long overdue. I mean, there are some people who thought we should have started with Majel first, and I don't necessarily disagree. Perhaps we should have, but the time is right to talk about her now, especially with all of the Star Trek that is currently in production, and everything ties back to the Cage, the one that she worked on first.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with we should have done her first.
Okay.
Because, and not that this is the last time that we're going to have a Women of Trek episode, but, the saying, save the best for last. Throw stuff around. And that's not to say that any one person is better or not better than another person of who we're talking to. I actually kind of like the idea that we saved Majel for the middle of these discussions, as we're going to be having several. There's a lot to talk about with her, and with schedules and what was going on, we had to move it around a couple of times. But I guess it just makes it more exciting that we're finally getting around to talking about what I've called the matriarch of Star Trek for quite a while now.
She really was. I mean, if you think about it, she's there since the beginning. It's long reputed that the network didn't necessarily like her as number one. And so Gene put a blonde wig on her and reintroduced her as Nurse Chapel, and he thought he was pulling the wool over everybody's eyes. And if you read Mark Cushman's These Are the Voyages, Volume 1, you'll find out that the network wasn't at all surprised. They're like, oh yeah, that's Gene's girlfriend.
Yeah.
It's like, the skies really work. It's like an episode of Mission Impossible up in here. But from the beginning is the phrase I use most to talk about Majel, because she truly was there. If you think about it, a lot of the direction, a lot of the pre-production and planning, she likely heard about, or maybe even had Gene bounce ideas off her. When you think about some of these things that happened in the original series, that's actually pretty fascinating. To think that some of these story ideas or some of these production elements may have started as conversations around a table.
I like to think of her as the glue that kept Star Trek together back in the 60s.
Oh, wow.
She really, she had I think she had a lot of influence on what Gene was doing. She was involved in just about every episode, whether it be as Chapel or number one or the computer. So she was always there. And I think that relationship that she had with Gene really allowed things to stay in focus when a lot of times there were problems going on the set. They were coming up against deadlines and budgets problems and everything like that. And I've always thought of her as that person who kept things together because she had that close connection to Gene.
Well, when you think about it, she met Gene in 1961, at least according to Star Trek Memories, which is, I believe, William Shatner's book. And in late 63, she was cast in Gene Roddenberry's series The Lieutenant, which, now think about this whole confluence of people. Starred Gary Lockwood, who would be in Where No Man Has Gone Before. And the episode which she was in also featured Leonard Nimoy.
Huh.
And it was directed by Mark Daniels, who would go on to direct 15 episodes of the original series. It's
sticking together.
It's that confluence of things that I find fascinating in hindsight, because at the time when Star Trek premiered, nobody knew any of this stuff. But looking back on it as fans, we can sort of sit back and go, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of see that, to get off track just a little bit, you kind of saw that in other iterations of Star Trek as things went on. People that worked together seem to always come back from different projects, would come back and they would work together on Star Trek. We saw that with JG, worked a lot with some other folks. I think Renee, he told us when he was on our show. There was also a gentleman that he roomed with in college who came back and did an episode of Star Trek with
Ron Canada.
There you go, Ron Canada. Yeah, so it's kind of neat how that those circles stick together even when it's different shows.
Ron Canada is one of those guys who you see in a bunch of things. He turns up in TMG. He turns up in Deep Space Nine. Pretty sure he turns up in Voyager, although I'd have to look that one up.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's this this network and web, and I'm sure it happens with other shows, but we get to see these things woven throughout the fabric of Star Trek, and it's pretty fascinating. So in 1964, when Gene starts putting together The Cage, what is the original pilot for Star Trek, Gene decides to select Majel to play number 1. And little could we have known then how monumental a decision that was, because here now 50 plus years later, 55 years later, we get that character back.
Yes, finally.
And we get some depth added to what Majel created in 1964 and 1965. And it's interesting to see the tie together between Rebecca Romijn's number 1 and Majel Barrett's number 1, because they are very much the same character.
And I got to give credit to Majel for that. I mean, Here we are plus 50 years later. She was only in a few scenes. She was on the bridge a couple times, and she's on the planet when they're firing the phaser, and then in the cage itself and so forth. And how many minutes do you think she had in the cage? Maybe 8-9 minutes total, if that she was on screen and had lines. But she was such a powerful character for the time back then that when fast forward 53 years on Discovery and Pike and number 1 show up, a lot of Rebecca's portrayal of her is just like what Majel did. And I think that's a testament to Majel herself and what she brought to the role, even though it was a small role.
Well, yeah, and plus there are the scenes on Talos 4 itself in the cage, when she and Yeoman Colt are sort of beamed down, right. The women! I can't help but use that line every time I talk about it.
That's all right.
But you're right. I mean, an incredibly strong character from the get-go. It was special to see a woman in that level of command in a fictional spaceship on television, because that just wasn't happening at the time. Here she was in charge of the whole ship because the captain wasn't on board. And once the captain went missing, it became her job to get him back. Yep. And that in its own right is kind of subversive as far as 1960s television goes.
And the scene that always gets me with her is when they're about to beam down to the planet and she's told that, sorry, number 1, she has to stay, and she looks really dejected. And I've always looked at that as the reason she couldn't go on the away mission was because of the ridiculous thinking back in the 60s. I'm not going to bring a woman down on the planet for this dangerous mission. Yeah. And her reaction, her hand kind of on her head, looking all upset, is something that's always stuck with me all through the years.
It's Star Trek. It's the 60s. It's not without its sexism of the time, unfortunately. It is what it is. And we're just glad that we got to see as much as we did. Now here's something that I didn't necessarily realize, and I need to go back and buy this book and read it, because I think I read it once about 20 years ago or so. But I'm going to quote from the Memory Alpha entry on this.
Okay.
Quote, in their book, Inside Star Trek, The Real Story, Herb Solow and Robert Justman claimed that the account of NBC rejecting the female first officer was a myth created by Roddenberry. In their version, NBC was proud of gender and race and diversity in its shows and even insisted on having a strong female leading character, but they felt Barrett was not a leading type actress with strong screen presence suitable for playing such a role. Apparently not wanting to hurt his mistress's pride, Roddenberry purportedly came up with the story in the 70s and 80s at Star Trek conventions, which he toured extensively with Majel at that point.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so I guess there's 3 sides to every story, right? There's one person's side, there's the other person's side, and there's the truth that's somewhere in the middle. Right. I can believe that some amalgamation of the entire story is true. But I have a hard time believing that that it wasn't just because they didn't like Majel. I can, knowing what the rest of television was like, I have a hard time believing that NBC was like, yeah, let's put a woman right up front, because it just doesn't seem to fit with the times.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you look at not just Star Trek, but any show back in that time, it was exactly the same way. So yeah, I can believe that. It's fun. I love how you say there's 3 sides to every story, because you're absolutely right. That middle is where the actual truth is. Yeah.
And so she's obviously not in the second pilot. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason. But then she gets reintroduced later in The Naked Time as Nurse Christine Chapel. That's one of your best impersonations yet, quite frankly.
Thank you.
And they stuck her in a blonde wig. And I don't know if Gene thought he was getting one by NBC or not. But I got to believe that, they weren't fooled. At least according to the Cushman books, they weren't fooled. And I wouldn't have been fooled either, because she's still a very strong presence, even as Nurse Chapel, being sort of secondary to Dr. McCoy.
Well, and based on stuff that I've read, when he did that, when he stuck her in the blonde wig and put her out on the set as Nurse Chapel, that pissed Lucille Ball off to no end, and wanted them both fired for it. Luckily, that didn't happen. But I guess really, it's like putting a hat and sunglasses on somebody and a fake beard and I don't recognize this person anymore. It's just. I guess that's the thinking back then. I mean, you wouldn't think of doing. I don't think anybody would be silly enough to do something like that now. Here, let's put a wig on Dan, and nobody will realize it's Dan because he's not bald anymore.
Well, that may be true, because usually when you put a wig on, people think you're Guy Fieri.
Touche.
Well, Lucy had been so turned off by her own husband's philandering, and by that I mean Desi Arnaz, that. When Roddenberry pulled this, I can believe she was incensed. As the head of the studio that was producing Star Trek, I am not surprised that that's what she wanted. It didn't happen, though. I think the cooler heads prevailed, and this is one of those times I'm glad Lucy didn't get her way, because it meant that Majel probably would never have been involved with Star Trek if she had. Yeah,
absolutely. And you think... because they were able, who was it? It was Herb Solau. Is that how you pronounce his name? Herb Solo. That's kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it? Actually talked Lucille into not doing anything with the two of them. And Chapel, I didn't realize this. Chapel is seen in 25 of the 79 episodes in TOS. I didn't realize it was that much. That's really something for me. And of course, my favorite one. I don't know if you wanted to talk about it a little bit more later,
fine.
but
no,
what are little girls made of? That is a Chapel episode, and I love her version of Chapel in that episode. I think it's great.
Well, it's arguably the one where Chapel gets the most to do. Mm-hmm. It's early on in season 1 as far as Chapel goes, and it's interesting that they made her the character that would have the fiance on a distant planet that eventually has robot guts. I don't believe, if memory serves now, I could have this wrong. I don't believe the original script had it focusing on Chapel. I believe that's how it evolved.
I'm glad it did. But
still a very strong performance of Chapel where she's doing more than Yes, Doctor or having soup thrown at her. Yeah, right?
And professing her love for Spock.
Right. And
when she's got a fiancé. What the heck, man?
Well, not at that point.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Because he was a robot dude. But it's a very strong episode. She gets to do a lot of scenes opposite Bill Shatner.
Yeah,
there's a lot of scenes opposite the actor who played Roger Corby, whose name escapes me at the moment. I apologize. But no, it showed that there was more to Chapel than just grabbing hypo sprays for the Doctor, and I really appreciate that. It was something I wish they had come back to more often.
Yeah.
You don't get to see a stronger Chapel really until the animated series.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, very much stronger. And of course, we see her as a doctor in the motion picture.
Briefly.
If I remember, very, very briefly. But yeah, that episode is one that I've always liked. I like the way that episode was filmed in terms of lighting, as with all of the TOS series. The lighting on those episodes was really great, but that glow that they gave her in pretty much any of her scenes, especially on the bridge, was really something that I appreciated. It really brought out her beauty, and she really was good as Chapel. I really appreciated what she brought to the series.
One of the things I didn't realize until sort of reading up on Majel and her life was that she and Gene didn't get married until August of 1969, so 50 years ago this month.
Oh, okay.
I did not know that.
The majority of the series, they weren't married. That's interesting.
Yeah, because they got married 2 months after the final episode was aired.
Yeah. Wow.
So Star Trek had already been canceled.
I had never realized that. I thought that they had been married throughout the entirety of this filming. So that's new news for me. I'm
Right?
Wow. That's really... Huh.
Yeah. I'm I'm kind of surprised by that because, we always think of Jean with Majel, and of course they were together for quite a while, but in clearing the historical record, as it were, I was really surprised to find that out. So the post-Star Trek years, we got some animated series in there. We got some Lincoln Enterprises in there, which I was always fascinated by. They founded that in 1967, which was still kind of during Star Trek, where they sort of sold merchandise related to Star Trek. And, the Vulcan IDIC symbol comes into play there at some point, I'm sure. But, she also did a lot of work with a lot of Jean's unsold pilots, which I was really kind of fascinated by. Some of those are great. The Questor tapes, that's pretty fantastic. Planet Earth is sort of meh. It depends on which version of Planet Earth, because I think there are two different ones. Or two different pilots with roughly the same story and a similar character named Dylan Hunt.
Okay.
But it still working with Gene side by side on these concepts. The more I look back on it, the more they clearly had a true partnership in the years post Star Trek. And that's really what kind of surprises me the most. You think of Gene as sort of a controlling individual. If you listen to the other writers, he had to constantly do rewrites. He had to constantly polish things that he wasn't asked to do. And yet here they are together again and again and again.
No. And following Gene's death, she continued doing things, continuing that legacy, so to speak. Before I get to that, though, one of the things that I've always appreciated about Majel is that she and Joseph Ruskin are the only two actors to be in every series of Star Trek before Discovery. That's really amazing when you think about it, when you think of the amount of time. But she actually was also in a fan film, Star Trek New Voyages, produced by James Cawley, who we're going to see this coming weekend when we go up to Ticonderoga. That's very interesting that she was in that. But
was she the computer in that?
She was actually. She voiced the ship's computer in World Enough and Time.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yep. So that is very cool that she lent her voice to that. Of course, Rod Roddenberry is so involved in things that are going on. But after Gene's death, she took materials from his archives and tried to assist with developing some series. Earth Final Conflict was one of them that actually ran from 97 through 2002. I didn't realize that she was so involved in that one.
She was.
And then the second was, of course, Andromeda, which I think a lot of people know about. That aired from 2000 to 2005. So even after Gene's death, she took the torch and ran with it and was very successful, I think, in things that she did late in life.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned that World Enough and Time. That's the episode of Star Trek Phase 2 / New Voyages that was co-written by Mark Scott Zicree, who wrote Far Beyond the Stars for Deep Space Nine.
Oh, okay.
Also stars George Takei as Sulu.
Yes.
You see Grace Lee Whitney as Janice Rand, and you get Majel Barrett as the voice of the computer.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a total callback.
And a family reunion.
A little bit, and it's a pretty legendary fan film as things go. Quite frankly, it's definitely worth the watch. So, yet we digress.
Yes. Anyway,
I want to talk I want to talk a lot about Majel and Next Gen, because I really think that's where Majel's prominence, both in the Star Trek franchise and in Star Trek itself, really came to fruition. I think when people initially saw her cast as Lwaxana Troi, Deanna Troi's mother, daughter of the Fifth House, yada, 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 it was a little bit of fan service at first, we thought. But it turns out it was so much more than that. And, Majel wound up playing, by her description, the anti-Mame of the galaxy to some extent. And I think that's the persona that people most identify with Majel as a person. They probably believe, I know I did, that she was probably a lot more like Lwaxana than she probably was like Nurse Chapel or Number One.
Yeah, and I've talked about several times here on Trek Geeks that I'm not the biggest fan of Lwaxana. That's nothing against Majel. Sometimes I didn't really appreciate the character. I think I've got a better appreciation for her now. And of course, the episode Half a Life is hands down, far and away, the best Lwaxana episode of TNG. And she really got to shine in that one. But, I like that description, the anti-mame that you said. I think that fits perfectly for the character of Lwaxana, especially the first couple of episodes with her. It just wasn't something that rang with me. But like I said, as I've watched things more over the last few years, I have a better appreciation for her. And of course, as we'll get into, she also, had a couple of guest appearances on DS9 as Lwaxana, which I think for the most part, you and I enjoyed.
I actually think that, Deep Space Nine allowed her to shed the Auntie Mame persona.
Yeah.
To some extent, and actually get into some more, heavier material, if you will. I actually think that her appearances on Deep Space Nine were probably the best turns of Lwaxana for the most part, instead of Next Gen. And I'm going to use Half a Life as sort of the exception to the rule, because there's also Manhunt.
Right.
Which is not a terrible episode, but it's a little over the top. And in Deep Space Nine, we see less over the top Lwaxana,
right?
And we see more introspective, that relationship that she forms with Odo. But back to Next Gen for a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what we learned from Lwaxana in Next Gen is that you can inject a little comedy and over-the-topishness and still have it be a very Star Trek episode. I think that in the early days of Next Gen, it was really uptight. Those first few episodes are tough on that level because people haven't settled in yet. And I think that having Lwaxana as sort of that force that helps bind really went a long way. You can tell that people were a little more at ease in those episodes, at least with their characters. But that first appearance of Lwaxana, and I think it's Haven. Yes, it's Haven. With Armin Shimmerman as the talking box, is probably my favorite of the TNG appearances for the most part because of everything you learn about Lwaxana.
Interesting. Because that one's hard for me to watch.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why. Maybe, like you're right. Season 1 is uptight.
Yeah,
it's uncomfortable. They haven't found their groove as actors and characters on the show, and that one, I liked Armin and Mr. Home probably better.
It's not that we dislike season 1. I mean, it decidedly is very uptight is really the only word I can use. It's just people are not comfortable.
Yeah. That's interesting that you like that one as much as you do. As I've done with any episode that we've talked about, which I really have a hard time liking, I'm totally willing to go back and watch it again and see if I can get a better appreciation for it, especially since we're sitting here talking about the actress. So I'm willing to bet you a cup of coffee or a drink in Ticonderoga that I'll appreciate it a lot more.
Oh, I'm sure you will. As I think that we've come to realize in the commission of doing this podcast that we get to watch things with a different eye, if you will. I think that the most brilliant scene in Haven is the dinner scene because it is so expertly written and the acting is fantastic. It's very much like a play.
Yeah.
With its pacing, with its structure. It is inherently hilarious.
I do appreciate that scene. I will give you that. Yeah.
And Majel, that scene doesn't work without Majel.
Yeah.
Because she's the straight person in that, and she sells it, and it is awesome.
Yeah, she does.
When I look at her, because she was only in TNG as Lwaxana 6 times, which is really kind of amazing to me. There's Haven, there's the aforementioned Manhunt, there's Majel Troi, there's Half a Life, which we mentioned, there's Cost of Living, and one of my least favorite episodes of Next Gen, Dark Page. Yeah. However, I want to talk a little bit about Dark Page because, unlike the rest of Next Gen, it is pretty dark. It takes Lwaxana to a place that I don't think any of us could have possibly imagined. And it perhaps tells us why she's a little over the top all the time. She has this larger than life persona because she suffered such a significant and tragic loss as a parent. And when you consider the character through that lens, it's a shame that the Dark Page came as her last episode on TNG, because some of that might have been some interesting layering in the middle for us to learn about.
Mm-hmm. I had a problem with Dark Page because it's late in the series, and all of a sudden you're finding out about this chapter from a character who, even though has been in 5 previous episodes, it's a pretty significant thing in her life, and we're just finding out, and I kind of think they shoehorned it in for some reason, and I never really appreciated the fact that this is canon, that this really happened, and we've never seen anything about it. It would have made more sense if it was kind of retconned later, to be honest with you, in my opinion, and which is why I think that's why I didn't like it at all. And I like how you said how she has this personality that she's always, over the top. You know who she reminds me of? Because I just got done my rewatch. She reminds me of Hank on Breaking Bad. Because whenever Hank's around people, he's got this, larger than life attitude, and he's always joking. But whenever he's by himself, you see that he's going through a lot of problems.
Interesting.
And it's something that popped into my head as you mentioned that. But yeah, Dark Page, not one of my favorites at all. Not so much for it's just not a great episode, but how they kind of threw that whole history in about Deanna, which is pretty significant history, and just kind of threw it in when we were like, wait a minute, where did this come from?
The one thing I will say about Dark Page, if this were Say Something Nice, and I had to talk about Dark Page, I would say we can't have the Lwaxana we see in The Forsaken without seeing Dark Page first.
Okay.
The Forsaken being her first appearance in Star Trek Deep Space Nine is Lwaxana. Because she starts that relationship with Odo.
Right.
Who is every bit as lonely an individual as Lwaxana is at that phase. And I don't think that she opens up to him if we don't see her confront and experience that loss in Dark Page. That's my personal feeling.
And starting to heal.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. Absolutely.
Because it's a very different Lwaxana that we get in Deep Space Nine.
Very different, and it's one that I've always liked. I think one of the most touching scenes of the entire series is when she allows Odo to revert to his gelatinous form and kind of like holds him in her dress in her lap because he can't hold his form anymore because they've been trapped in that turbo lift for so long. I just think that is an amazing scene, just brilliantly acted by both Majel and Renee, and I'm glad that we got to see her a few times on Deep Space Nine.
Even though Fascination is one of those episodes. Now, that said, I kind of like Fascination. Yeah. I think I skipped it when we did DS9 season 2. See it or skip it?
I can't remember.
Season 3. My bad. I think it was a skip it for me. But I do like. I like it anytime the actors can step outside the normal character box and do something a little different. And Fascination is that type of episode. And it harkens back a little bit to the Auntie Mame Lwaxana and less of the Forsaken Lwaxana. But her last appearance in Deep Space Nine, unfortunately, is in what I think is the worst episode of the series. The Muse.
Yes.
The Jake storyline is terrible. Mm-hmm. The Lwaxana storyline isn't bad. But it's
the B story.
It's the B story in an otherwise unwatchable episode.
Right.
And I feel like Lwaxana really gets the opportunity to come full circle with who she is in the Muse.
I agree. Now the Muse is the one with Michael and Sarah, if I remember correctly. Is that one? Yeah, don't even start with me. But that's the one with him, right? Is that the Muse? It is where she's the baby, and they get married. Odo, is that the one where he and yeah. I really like that. And that's another thing. Oh my God, she's gonna have a baby. That's like a say what moment. But yeah, it is. She does come full circle with that. I really do like that storyline in the Muse. Sometimes I forget that that's part of the Muse because I don't think about the Jake aspect of that episode very much. I focus on the Lwaxana, Michael and Sarah stuff with Odo.
Yes.
And I appreciate that a lot more. And like you said, because it's the B story, I don't think it has the recognition or the respect that it deserves being Lwaxana's final appearance.
It really doesn't. Yeah. Because I think she really got... It's unfortunate that her last turn as Lwaxana is that episode because it's really some great work by her. Mm-hmm. And honestly, all of this work as Lwaxana is really fantastic acting because she adds layers and depth to this character that we may not have considered previously, especially when TNG was first run.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You think maybe she's going to be a guest for maybe one episode?
Yeah.
And it turns into a lot of that happens with a lot of Trek characters. I mean, it happened with JG and others, but with Lwaxana and Majel, absolutely. You know, the watching for the first time when she's on that episode, I probably didn't think she'd ever show up again.
No,
but she does, and I still can't believe it's only 6 episodes. That's mind blowing. That shows you the impact that she has as an actress and as that character. She's only in 6 episodes, but you feel like she's in a whole bunch more.
Well, I mean, she is in a whole bunch more in a completely different way, because she is the voice of artificial intelligence in most of Star Trek.
Yes,
and that's kind of mind blowing. You think of all the home assistants we have today, and all the Siri-like devices, or the Alexas, or, you know, when you call out "Okay Google." Oh, my phone just lit up.
Yeah, I heard a beep.
Sorry about that. You know, the voices that talk back to us aren't these sort of roboticized,
right?
Science fiction of the 50s takes on artificial intelligence, kind of like TOS was in a way, but
right.
As computers evolved in Next Gen, we got an interactive voice that was conversational. And if you think about it, every home assistant voice that you hear today likely wouldn't have happened without Majel as the computer in Next Gen.
Absolutely.
And Deep Space Nine and Voyager.
And Enterprise.
And Enterprise. And well, but I mean, kind of. But without that work, you know, people just talking to their computers and hearing a female voice that is conversational likely would not have taken place.
Absolutely. I loved that evolution. Like you said, it's the robotic computer voice in TOS.
Working.
Exactly. Acting, but then it becomes a more fluid conversational voice. I like the way that you put that, conversational sounding computer in TNG, and it really is a staple. And I would love, and I think that there was discussion at this one time, and I don't know where it's gone, that they were going to get the rights from Roddenberry's company to have her voice be a voice that you could have Siri be, or Alexa, or something like that. So you could actually have the Enterprise D's computer voice of Majel be your home assistant voice. If that were to happen, I would pay whatever they're offering or whatever they're asking for to get that to take place in my home.
So my Google Home downstairs right now, I have set it to use the voice of Grammy-winning, Oscar-winning singer-performer John Legend. Because one day that turned up as an available voice. I'm like, well, damn, awesome. If I'm going to have Google results read to me by John Legend, my day is going to be instantly better, because, you know, the man's amazing. And he does it. He didn't sit there and record every word possible. It sounds like a computer generated version of John Legend's voice based on things that John Legend has said. It's perfect in tone. It is perfect in cadence. It is perfect in believability. And I have to believe that with that technology, they could very easily have Majel's voice as, you know, that type of TNG computer voice, as long as the two sides can get together and just get it done.
I hope they do that. That would just be absolutely fantastic. That's one of the building blocks, not right, but that's one of the staples of TNG is that computer voice. It's really great. Now, in Deep Space Nine, you saw it a lot. Didn't they change it halfway through DS9 to somebody else, or is it always Majel throughout the entire series?
Well, Majel was always the Federation computer.
Okay, so I'm thinking
Judy Durand was always the Cardassian computer.
The Cardassian, that's
from episode 1.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I was thinking. Okay. So yeah, I would absolutely love to see that happen. Oh God, come on, people, get it done. Bill, call your contacts. Let's get that show on the road.
Okay. Hey, John Legend. Hashtag Hey John Legend. You know, we've talked a lot about the various roles that Majel has played. We've talked about her being there at the foundation of Star Trek and it's getting off the ground with Gene. We've talked about her being really a force, a creative force with Gene on some of these post-Star Trek projects. But we haven't really talked about her legacy aside from being a computer voice. You referred to her earlier in this discussion as the matriarch of Star Trek. She's held the title the First Lady of Star Trek for the longest time, and rightfully so. But in your estimation, outside of those things, what do you feel Majel's true legacy is when it comes to Star Trek and fandom?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, you put me on the spot.
I like to do that because it throws you a little off your game.
Yeah.
It makes you use the tiny pea brain of yours a little more because we don't do stuff to geek as often. But if you had to name a couple of elements, what do you think those would include?
She was groundbreaking. She broke the barrier, I think. She was the first, a lot of people talk about Nichelle, but when you think about it, Majel was the first female actor in TOS to really have something to chew on and to give us as watchers of the show. Whether it was number one right off the bat or as Chapel. She was a character that even though it was a lesser character in terms of screen time and she wasn't on every episode and every mission. When she was there, she gave a boost to women back in the day, when they were starting to, get into acting careers. So I think that's the thing that I would think of off the top of my head. And she also was when you look fast forward into the future, she has allowed other women to succeed in doing similar things. Take a look at Julianne Grossman, who does the work of the computer in Discovery and does an absolutely phenomenal job as a computer. I love the sound of the computer voice on Discovery. I haven't read a lot of interviews with her, but I've got to think that some of this work that she's doing is in part because of what Majel did back in the day on TOS and TNG.
I have to agree with you. I mean, when somebody sets a standard that, is sort of woven throughout the fabric of Star Trek, like Majel's contributions, even as the computer voice, it's still incredibly significant in the world of Star Trek. When I think of Majel's legacy, I can't help but think about the times I've seen her at conventions talking one-on-one to fans at a table, signing autographs. I was there at her last convention, and I was a little taken aback because she looked frail.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be her last convention. Mm-hmm. But she was there all day, meeting every single fan, talking to fans, taking photos with fans. And I mentioned earlier that I've always thought of her as kind of an ambassador of Star Trek. And in those years, that's exactly what she was. She wasn't the full of life Lwaxana. Mm-hmm. She wasn't the reserved Christine Chapel. She wasn't the commanding number one. She was a woman who used to act and helped her husband create something pretty fabulous that people still came to decades later. And I think she understood what that role meant to everybody else. When you look at the fact that she is so present in all of Star Trek, that she's always been there. The first Trek without her, man, was rough. I'm not going to lie. Mm-hmm. But knowing that she does have such a significant piece in all of Star Trek, I think is what really brings me the most joy, because she so richly deserved it.
Absolutely. And she had a passion for it.
Yes.
Like you said, sitting there talking to fans. And think this. She recorded her lines for the 2009 reboot film, and she passed away 8 days after she recorded those.
Yeah.
She was involved with it literally until she passed away. And that just shows how much it was part of her and how much she loved doing it. And that's part of her legacy. This thing that is Star Trek, there's so much of her in it. And it was right up until literally the day she died.
Yes, it was. Now, she died in 2008, and I am fairly certain that she was at STLV that summer. If it wasn't, it was the summer before, 2007. Wow. But I am almost positive that she was there. And when you consider the fact that she was 76 when she passed, mm-hmm. It's kind of amazing to think that she's been gone now 11 years.
Right.
Because, my memory of her at that last con in either 07 or 08 is just as fresh. That was before it was at the Rio, I'm pretty sure. I think it was still at the Hilton at that point.
Hilton, okay.
And I remember talking with her briefly, and she was such a delight. And it's something that, I'm so lucky to have, we met Leonard Nimoy at the same time, you and I.
Yep.
I'm so lucky to have seen Leonard's final convention appearance in Star Trek at Las Vegas. And I take a lot of solace in the fact that I met Majel at her last convention, because I really got the opportunity to say thanks, and that's something that will always stick with me.
Right. I have to say, I feel the same. I got to see Nichelle at this convention, STLV, and we know that this is her last STLV, and I was able to say similar things to her. So I'm really glad that you were able to do that at what was her last convention. Like I said, it's one of the things I wish that I had been able to see and take part of during my younger years, was to be able to see her at a convention. So I'm really glad you were able to.
Me too. I think discussions like this one are important because we have to remember the legacy and the history of these things, not just in Star Trek, but in the world in general, because it's the way that these memories and these recollections propagate throughout our society. By talking about the contributions that these individuals made, it serves as an important reminder to how much hard work they put in and how pivotal they were to things like Star Trek. Clearly there are people, and especially women, who have made amazing contributions throughout recorded history. But when I consider Star Trek, perhaps Majel has made the greatest contribution as a pioneer of women in that franchise. And it's not until you sit down and talk about it that you realize how significant her contribution was.
Absolutely. It just, in this last hour that we've been talking about her, my appreciation level has soared, which makes me think that I'm awful for saying that I didn't like Lwaxana as much as I should have.
Well, I think that was more the writing in some of those episodes. And we found that to be true, as we've looked at episodes on Trek Geeks. It's like, it's almost never the actor.
That's true. Yeah, very good point.
It's 99.9% of the time, it's the people putting words on the page, because the actor is only delivering what was there. And I think that that's absolutely true with Lwaxana. Some of that over-the-topishness I don't think was reined in effectively enough on the page.
True.
And Majel delivered it, like a pro. She hit her marks. She said she gave her performance and called it a day. And now we get to watch it for time and all eternity, which is pretty special.
I like that. Good way to put it.
Dan, what else is pretty special? Our friends, the band 5 Year Mission, they have just given to us the episode 0, the introduction to 5 Year Mission, the podcast. What? I know. We posted it this past weekend in Camp Kittimer for people to hear. So if you remember in Camp Kittimer, you can dial that up. It's about 15 minutes long. You can get a sense of what the 5 Year Mission, the podcast, is going to be like when episode 1 drops very, very soon. Correct. But in the meantime, what y'all should do is head on out to 5yearmission.net. Please go buy all their CDs. Show them some love on the website, because they are fantastic. We are so grateful to them for not only what they're adding to the Trek Geeks network by way of their brand new podcast, but also in the music that we use here in Trek Geeks every single week. So it's 5yearmission.net. Please show them some love and get ready to put their podcast in your ears, because it's going to be fantastic.
Did you just throw a y'all in there? I think you did.
I might have.
Wow. All right. Okay. Well, that's great.
I'm preparing.
Okay, that's great. Yes. Well, Bill, it's a special episode that we recorded this week.
It is. It is.
Yeah, she was a woman whose grace and elegance was a thing to behold, and she says it. I can't even. I'm losing my frame of thought, because it was just.
No, it's a very small frame.
Amazing. Whether chasing the captain of a Federation starship or cradling the exhausted liquid form of a changeling in her lap after a long concert, she was always a classy and interesting woman who I now have a better appreciation for based on the conversation that we've had here today. Of course, I'm talking about Lwaxana Troi, daughter of the 5th House, holder of the sacred drumsticks of Reeks, heir to the holy symbols of Beta Z.
Yeah. So you wanted Fark and company to still be on the network with the podcast, right? Because when you come up with crap like this,
hey, they signed a contract.
They actually have not.
No. See, they don't sign contracts with us because then they take me to court.
Well, and quite frankly, you deserve it.
I do. Yes, thank you.
Lwaxana
Troi.
Lwaxana Troi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Holy symbols of Beta Z.
Yep. Yeah, holder of the sacred drumsticks of Reeks. And I'm not talking like chicken drumsticks, like you eat. No.
Now I want chicken.
Okay. Chicken. Let's go get chicken waffles for breakfast.
Oh, that sounds yummy.
I like that.
But that's 5yearmission.net. And head on over to Camp Kittimer. Check out 5-Year Mission, the podcast, episode 0. We think you're going to enjoy it. Of course, don't forget you can support the Trek Geeks network of podcasts, which now includes 5-Year Mission, by subscribing to bonus content via Patreon. You can get access to exclusive content that you're just not going to get anywhere else. You can see the first of our annual supporters pins from Fansets. I'm working on that year 2 design right now. Well, not right now, but right now. And even get raw, unedited audio of our podcast along with a whole bunch of other perks, Dan.
Absolutely. We want to take a moment right now, though, to thank our associate producers for Trek Geeks. We are very grateful for their support, and they include Adam Sanders, Brandon Everidge, Heather Sohn, John Krikorian, Rick Tatro, Trey Womack, Shane Murray, Sean Lynn, Tim Robertson, Tim Serdar, Vikram Bhatt, Greg Rozier, Andy Fark, Kimberly Francis, Ron Robel, Brooke Horton, Christina Werther, and the gracious and wonderful Conrad Hutchins.
We also want to thank our producers of the Trek Geeks podcast for their support, and they are Ken Tripp, Casey Shafsky, Charlie Mulvey, Chris Trabuzio, Craig Ewing, Eric Extreme, Jackie and Chris Hackney, Leonel Marchand, Matt McGonigal, Mike Bovia, Harry Michelson, Patrick Escudero, Sean O'Halloran, Peter Craig, Ben Russett, Corey Stone, Ken Bird, and the lovely and talented Scott Vachon.
Boy, those lists just keep getting bigger, don't they?
We almost need a separate podcast just to list the people who help us produce the podcast.
Wow. Well, if you'd like to become a producer on the network or even get access to the raw audio for Trek Geeks episodes, head on over to patreon.com/Trek Geeks today, where subscription levels start as low as $1 a month.
Wow. $1 tiny dollar per month. That's amazing. Next week, Dan, we have not done a deep dive into a Next Gen episode in a while. So I recently asked you to name an episode off the top of your head, and you came up with a pretty interesting one.
I don't know where that came from. It was just like, boom. But it is actually, when you think about it, Bill, it's the ultimate your face episode. Am I right? I'm right. I'm always right. The title says it all. Deanna is surgically altered and forced to pretend she's a member of the Tal Shiar to help 2 high-level Romulans defect to the Federation. Intrigue, suspense, and drama unfold as we deep dive into Face of the Enemy next week on Trek Geeks, the flagship podcast of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network.
And of course, that's going to be a fantastic discussion. Love to talk about Next Gen. That's one where Marina Sirtis gets to talk about characters acting outside the box. Mm-hmm. She definitely gets to step outside the normal character stuff with this, and it's going to be a fun one. Of course, for more great Star Trek discussion, Dan, we want everyone to listen to the other member podcasts of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network. Of course, there's us, there's Discovering Trek, the Star Trek Discovery Companion, there's Politrex, there's the brand new 5-Year Mission podcast, and of course, don't forget about Trek Geeks Game Night over on our YouTube channel. And for all the news on all the Star Trek show, please visit our great friends at treknews.net. For now, this has been episode number 188 of the Trek Geeks Podcast. We do hope you all live long and prosper.
Working. Coconut is good. Thank you.
Wow, the computer's wrong.
Your face is wrong.
Music for Trek Geeks is provided by 5-Year Mission. They are writing one song for each episode of the original series. Download their music at 5yearmission.net. Trek Geeks, a Star Trek podcast, is a production of Coconut Media Works, executive producer Bill Smith. For even more Star Trek discussion, check out Discovering Trek, a Star Trek Discovery Companion, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and discoveringtrek.com.
Bing bong!
Bing bong. There's a little.
Yeah, watch your meter there, Chief.
Bing bong.
I'm glad you're adding so much value to the show this week. Thank you so much.
People want to hear me do my goofy stuff, so I'm here for the fans, because I love them a lot more than I love you. Which is funny because I was just praising you on the Patreon side of things,
which they'll never hear.
That's right. So I can categorically deny it ever happened.
Well, no, you can't, because there's a group of people in the world who knows it did, and I will always have the source audio.
No, they're liars.
Great, way to go.
How are you?
I'm well. I didn't sleep very well last night.
Oh,
but
me neither.
I just I can't find a happy medium with my back. So.
Oh, all right. Well, sleep standing up. Horses
I'm gonna sleep podcasting in a minute because you're boring the hell out of me.
I'm just waiting for you to bring something good to the conversation. So I just have to. I feel like what's his face, the guy who was on stage for the when I was Galt on stage and he was filling dead air, Hoffman. Oh yeah, so now you're not going to talk. All right, I see where we're going.
No, I'm waiting for you to say something that's worth my responding to.
Oh, all right.
Hasn't happened yet in 187 episodes before this.
I was going to say, it's taken you 4.5 years to finally say that. Wow,
I know. That's on me.
I'm sitting here at my podcast station in my Star Trek studio, and in front of me I have the wonderful Planet Killer from Eaglemoss, and right in front of it, sitting on its stand, is the prototype Enterprise. And it looks awesome. Which
only people in Vegas know about right now.
That's right. Well, no, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, guess what? That's okay. It still looks good.
Would have your finger on the pulse of America.
Oh, I got my pulse on. I have a hard time getting my own pulse sometimes. So.
Oh, I'm waiting for the day that pulse just stops.
Wow, that was harsh.
True. The truth is not harsh.
It's not. It's. I don't even have any. I can't even. I never come back for that. It's too early in the morning. I didn't sleep good.
Oh, the poor baby.
I didn't sleep good. And I can't wait to shave this monstrosity off my face.
You got just over another week to go because this week, next weekend, as this drops, or this coming weekend as this drops, we will be in Ticonderoga, New York at Trekonderoga, which is put on by the official. The Star Trek Original Series Set Tour, officially licensed by CBS. This is going to be a great little convention. I am so psyched for this.
It is going to be awesome. I think it's going to be so great. The worst part is going to be the 3-hour drive with you both ways. That's going to be tough. But you know what? I'm going to do it because I'm looking forward to the convention, and maybe we'll finally make up and be friends again.
Nah.
No.
Well, we may take the opportunity to maybe record several carpool conversations.
That's a good idea. We're gonna have plenty of time to do it.
Down and back.
Yeah, 6 hours and 40 minutes of driving.
Oh God, round trip. That's both ways.
Yes, round trip. Yeah.
Because if I had to do 6 hours one way with you, I would. I don't know what I'd do.
Would you jump out of the car at 75 miles an hour?
No, but I might fly instead.
Okay.
I would spend the money and get on a plane so that I could avoid you for that long.
Wow. So we just spent all this time together bonding in Vegas, and now you got to be like that. Back to the regular thing, huh?
No, I'm just being honest. I mean, I can barely handle 3 hours in a car with you.
Here we go.
Less than an hour to work was bad enough.
Oh, that
3 hours?
We got to do that again soon.
Now 6 hours? Oh God, I think I would just quit.
Okay. Wow. See, ladies and gentlemen, I try to be nice and, being very complimentary and talking about all the good things about Bill, and he comes back with that kind of stuff.
I can't help it if you're a drag.
I'm pulling you down with me.
Oh, yeah, like an anchor. Like an anchor.
Concrete galoshes. Huh? Everything can be Star Trek related if you want it to be.
It actually can. I mean, and the fact that it's not. So here's the thing I run into in my house. everything right now is office related.
I knew you were going to say that. Yep.
Because my wife just throws out quotes intermittently, and for years I've not done this with Star Trek.
Okay.
Because I didn't want to be that person.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to have my wife go, "Are you talking about friggin' Star Trek again?" And my wife just keeps going, "You know how I be."
Yeah.
And that's a quote from The Office.
Yep.
And at first I didn't realize it was a quote from The Office. I'm like, where's that come from? She's like, "You know how I be." And finally the episode was on and I heard it. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You have been quoting The Office now for weeks and I just didn't know. She goes, "Oh yeah."
So she's that person.
No, because she's doing it with The Office. If you're that person, you're doing it with Star Trek.
Oh,
and it's stereotypical.
okay. So it's okay to do it with The Office.
Well, I tell you what, if our roles were reversed, there's no way in hell you'd tell your wife it's not okay. Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying, though. That has nothing to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Kelly, stop doing The Office quotes. It's dumb.
I'm going to cart that off as its own separate WAV file and send it to her.
That's awesome. Okay.
Sorry, are you ready to do this, jerk?
Yeah, let's do it.
Then do it already.
Wow. You need to
Get going.
back off there. Smiley.
Come on, Bucktooth.
This week's episode of the 5-Year Mission Podcast is brought to you by Fansets, the place for amazing pin collectibles. See all the pins and collectibles they have to offer at fansets.com, and stay tuned for this week's special 5-Year Mission Podcast discount code. Fansets. We are Star Trek.
All right, ready?
Bye.
Let me hear the chord.
Bye.
By now you figured out that this is the 5-Year Mission Podcast.
You know us as a band, now you're going to know us as a podcast. Welcome to episode 0. I realize that's not a number, but it sounds weird saying, but welcome to episode 0 of the 5-Year Mission Podcast. For episode 0, we decided it would probably be a good idea just to kind of introduce ourselves. So here we are, talking about one of our favorite subjects, ourselves.
Hello, everybody. I am Mike Rittenhouse. I know Andy likes to assume that everyone knows who we are, but in case anyone listening to this does not know, 5-Year Mission is a band, foremost, and we write music about episodes of Star Trek. For those of you who do know us, then I don't know why you're listening to this, because you know that this is going to be a big waste of your time. But anyway, my name is Mike, and I play guitar, and I sing and write songs for the band. I also play bass and keyboard sometimes. Noah?
I'm Noah.
What do you do in the band?
I play music and
It's a fantastic answer, Noah.
I write songs.
Okay, what else?
I sing.
Uh-huh.
I play guitar.
Right.
I play bass.
Uh-huh.
I fake my way on the keyboard.
And I play drums. Patrick, who are you?
Hi, I am Patrick. I play the guitar and write songs. In the band, I sometimes play bass guitar and I sometimes play keys. I do not play drums because only you do that. I do also play the ukulele and occasionally theremin or pianosaurus.
My name is Chris Spurgeon and I am the leader of the band. Okay, I'm not the leader, but I do all the work. Doo-doo, I said doo-doo. To be fair.
Do you?
I do all the hard stuff, except for learning the songs. So what's the question? What do I need to answer here?
Who are you, Andy?
It's a question I've been pondering for a lifetime already. Now, I'm Andy, and I've written 3 songs for the band, and I play drums, and that's it.
Incredible interview.
And that's Andy. So now each of us are going to share like a childhood memory or an experience relating to Star Trek. And here comes Noah to interview me. Oh, hey, man.
Hey.
What's up?
Not much. I'm just in here. I got this microphone, and I'm trying to make it work so that we can. I'm supposed to interview you, I guess, but
I don't care about that stuff, man.
Oh, well.
Just ask me the questions.
That's what I'm doing.
Since Noah's a dummy, what is a favorite Star Trek memory for you, Mike?
So when I was, let's see, what year would that have been? I was probably about 12. I went to the drive-in with my friend and his parents, and we were going to see The Last Crusade, Indiana Jones. And there were two movies. The other movie was The Final Frontier. Ooh. No. I love The Final Frontier. I actually really like that movie. I like it better than several of the other movies. So we went to the theater and we watched Indiana Jones, and then we watched Star Trek. And that night, my friend and I stayed up the entire night playing with his G.I. Joes, pretending that they were Star Trek characters. Huh. And I don't remember what character it was, but he looked kind of like Scotty, so I was like playing Scotty, and my friend, he kind of sucked. He was an only child, and he had like every toy ever made.
Oh, you told me about that kid.
Yeah, and so I was super jealous, but he had the G.I. Joe space shuttle. So
you have the aircraft carrier?
He did not have the aircraft carrier. That was like the one thing he didn't have. But he had the space shuttle, so we were playing with that and pretending it was the Enterprise, and so that was really my first Star Trek movie experience, for sure, and a big memory from my childhood.
I have a Star Trek memory, a visceral Star Trek memory burned into my brain. When I was little, my parents didn't have cable, so I would have to go to my friend's house next door to watch anything, pretty much. And I remember going over there and walking in the door at the exact moment that the ear slugs like leave Chekhov.
You know what's weird? That's my very first Star Trek memory.
Really?
I don't think I'd even seen the series before, and that's the one thing that burned into my brain when I was a kid.
It's a burner. I had seen Star Trek the original series many times in syndication, but I'd never seen the movie because I didn't have cable. So there I was, and I just remember like sinking down into the carpet and just going, just watching the rest of that movie and just being completely blown away by it and cursing my parents for not having cable. And
then having recurring nightmares about it.
And then being haunted for the rest of my life, yes.
Right.
How about you, Patrick?
If I want to go back all the way, when I was a young child, I was into Star Wars and the toys. And for Christmas one year, I got a Scotty action figure from the motion picture. And he was in like a gray uniform, didn't look anything like Scotty from the show. So I actually had no idea what it was for many years. And then I started seeing the show in syndication in the 80s. And I think Mirror Mirror is the first one I saw where I was really just blown away. And then I went to my first convention around 86, and they were doing some promotional stuff for the Next Generation. And so I got really super into that. And so those were my formative experiences.
So I didn't get in this. I wasn't like in Star Trek when I was younger. I had a friend who was really into it. And so he would talk about it, and he would show, like, he had, figures and all that stuff. And I would pretend like I knew what he was talking about because he was my friend, and I wanted to be able to share that with him. Not, it's not like I'd seen a bunch of episodes. I saw the movies as they came out, but I hadn't really seen the episodes so much. So I can remember Wrath of Khan and, the SETI eel, getting put into Chekhov's ear, and that was horrifying. I think I actually saw 4 before I saw that one, because it was the most mainstream, and I think that was when I was old enough where I could actually go and see it, because I think Wrath-the-Con was like 82 or something like that. So I was like 7, and so I was still a little young for that. I think when I started to appreciate it more was when, I was out of college, and I went to Vegas with this same friend, and we went to the Star Trek experience at the Hilton, and I got to see kind of the timeline that they had laid out, and it just kind of congealed into a world, I think, for me at that time. And then, I started appreciating it more then, and just saw more of the episodes, but it wasn't really until the band that I really did the deep dive.
So, Andy, what does Star Trek mean to you?
Is this the way we're going here? Star Trek to me, it is basically, it's an allegory, if you will, a space allegory, a spagalegory. No, Star Trek has always been very ahead of its time. It's always been very politically motivated, and lots of just morality tales, basically. And it's always just been about a better way of life. And that's the whole idea behind Star Trek. I mean, besides, some great action, some great writing, some great character development, underneath it all, it's always been just a really great show with really great morals, and teaches
Phasers on stun.
Phasers on stun. Get out of here.
I sure want to live. I sure want to live.
And there you have it. I like saying "and there you have it" because it sounds so final. That was us talking about ourselves. Thanks for tuning into episode 0 of the 5-Year Mission podcast. What are we going to do from here? We'll have some maybe celebrity interviews, maybe some fan interviews. Maybe we'll diagnose our own songs, figure out how these episodes work, how these songs work. Maybe we'll do some 1-star reviews. Maybe we'll do some Star Trek roasts. Maybe we'll do a lot of other things. And we'll figure it out from there. This is, after all, episode 0, and we have no clue what we're doing.
No, we do not. But we do kind of know what we're doing when we're making music. So if you're interested in that, you should definitely check out our YouTube channel, or follow us on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. If you search 5-Year Mission on any of those, we should be the first thing that comes up. If you want to send us any kind of messages or feedback on this podcast or our music, or just want to talk to us about anything in general, you can email us at 5yearmissionband@gmail.com. Now tell them about our sponsor, Andy.
This week's episode of the 5-Year Mission podcast has been brought to you by Fansets. Whether you choose to wear them or display them, there is something for everybody, ranging from the Star Trek universe to DC to Harry Potter and beyond. An unbelievable 20 new pins from Fansets made their debut at STLV this year. Wish we could have been there. And they are all amazing, including the Women of Trek collector set, including Lieutenant Uhura, Dr. Beverly Crusher, Counselor Deanna Troi, Major Kieran Nerys, Captain Catherine Janeway, Sub-Commander T'Pol, Commander Michael Burnham, the Borg Queen, and Edith Keeler. If you don't hear the name of a favorite female Star Trek character in there, don't worry, because this is going to be an ongoing series. As well as new autograph pins featuring Brent Spiner as Data and Doug Jones from Discovery as Saru. Each pin is personally signed and comes with a certificate of authenticity. These are not machine reproductions. All right, Fansets, are you really going to make me drop all that money on a Doug Jones pin? I think you just did. And also new from Star Trek Discovery, all the Season 2 episode pins from episodes 1 through 4, as well as the Season 2 logo pin. New Trek Tech pins, including the Klingon Batleth and a TNG phaser rifle, as well as the new Star Trek Picard logo pin and a half Picard, half Locutus pin. On top of all that, the STLV exclusive Uhura pin sold out within mere hours at STLV. But good news for anyone who is not at STLV but wants to get one of these collectibles. Head on over to fansets.com anytime between now and August 31st at midnight Eastern and pre-order this pin. Fansets will only be ordering the number of pre-orders that come through by August 31st, and they will be shipping by mid-October. After August 31st, you will never be able to order this pin again, so do it now. And as a special bonus to our listeners, if you would like to receive 15% off your entire order at fansets.com, simply enter the word 5-year mission at checkout, all caps, the number 5 at the beginning. This bonus code will be available until Sunday, September 15th, 2019 at midnight Eastern Daylight Time. Again, enter the code 5-year mission at checkout. Fansets. We are Star Trek, and we thank our friends at Fansets for sponsoring this week's episode. On the next 5-year mission podcast, earliest Star Trek memories and favorite convention moments. Come back for episode 1.
Coconut.